Hello, hello, everybody. How's it going? Look, fingers crossed we got the show on the road. You know how it is with live video, live stream. I always get a little bit anxious when we kind of click the button and see if things are actually happening. But I see the tabs refreshing over on my other monitor. That's the benefit of having a couple extra eyes. They call me Four Eyes for a reason. But with that, look, I'll bring up chat and we can banter for just a couple moments, if that's a-okay. Let's see, does it let me show chat? I swear, I'll figure out streaming at some point. But hey, super good to see everyone. Hey, let me be straight up. Let me not to say talk smack, but let me speak the truths. Because it's no secret, I have been putting together a couple live streams previously when we got together with Ellie to chat about some crypto, when we got together with Mishal to chat about some OSINT, open source intelligence, and it's been a lot of fun because it has been showcasing the skills, talents, the mastery of a lot of the cool Just Hacking training courseware developers, authors, and instructors. And I hope it's I don't know what to say, if it's clear, if it's evident, but without a doubt, no secret, I would like to help showcase, spread the love, and make sure we can shine a spotlight on them. So we're doing, if it's not clear, Just Hacking training live streams to keep you informed, to keep you aware of all the sweet stuff that we're doing. If you're also interested in some other forms of that, if you can't catch the live stream, we do have a little newsletter that I'm trying to cook up as well. And give me the time, please, with your permission and blessing. I gotta do the, not to say shill, but I gotta talk about this cool thing that we're doing. I am very pleased and proud of and do love a lot of the Just Hacking training work. So with that, we do these live streams. But thank you for your grace and let me turn into a billboard every now and again. With that, let me do the spiel. Let me cruise through, because there are a couple sweet updates. I will try to share my screen for a little bit, but I know everyone is tuning in because we are supposed to be doing some Active Directory fun, and we will, without a doubt. I just want to take a couple minutes. So here's the loose run of show. You know, we never do any regimented, any scripted thing. I want to have a couple moments here, as these usual, to hang out, banter, give you some quick updates, and then get our special guest in the mix. So we have a phenomenal Slavi Parpulev, and I'll have to ask him, can you forgive me on how I butcher his name? If I do, forgive me. But I do want to give him the spotlight, let him do some show and tell, some sweet demonstrations and cooking show magic for Active Directory stuff and everything that he's been showcasing in his Just Hacking training, Mastering Active Directory security courses. With that, let me tell you all the stuff that's up. So I'll share my screen and I'll choose just a window. No, we can go to that screen. I think that's fair. All right. So, okay, just a teaser because it has to be done. For folks that aren't tracking, we've spun up and we're getting started with our crack, our old college try for the Schoolhouse. Not to say an academy, right? But a training platform. And it is courses, it is exercises, it is challenges, it is activities, hack-alongs with a video, or even some old archives from Capture the Flag competitions that we've hosted. So I hope there's some good value there. We want to make sure that it is affordable, accessible, and easy, letting folks get into a whole-blown lab environment, because I think that's the benefit, is that you could really easily spin up tons of virtual machines, kind of all within the course itself. There are quizzes, there are little learning, check your knowledge and understanding sections, final capstone things, and we're having a whole lot of fun putting it together. So if you are curious, the link is justhacking.com. And we've been trying to get this schedule going where some of the folks from our seriously phenomenal lineup of great folks that are helping contribute, and I'm so grateful for all their support. We're getting more as time goes on, which I am super excited about. But one thing is that I've got to try an attempt to put my hat in the ring. And I think we have put out just now what is our dark web and cybercrime investigations course. So I would love to at least tease and show that to you, that it's out and about, you can jump in. There is a 20% off little discount for launch, for the very start of things popping off. Now, let me please say, this is not something that has a ginormous or really accessible virtual machine and lab environment in it, because it's telling you, teaching you a little bit more about Tor hidden services, the dark web, all those .onion domains. And I can't really recreate that inside of a virtual machine, you know? With that said, I'd still love for you to be able to learn a little bit more about how it all comes to life. Let me add the other note and disclaimer, though. It's not sharing .onion URLs or links or websites for those cybercrime shenanigans. It's a very, very strange tightrope and balancing act of, hey, we're chatting about cybercrime, but I can't be emboldening, encouraging that. So I hope I have your grace with that, but it is something that I am very excited about. And this is a collaboration. This is actually from a whole lot of folks that are doing investigations actively for threat actors out and about. I know folks might have been tracking the Snowflake breach. You saw Conor Muka, a lot of the other individuals that have kind of been associated with that. And I hope it's fun. I hope it's neat. I hope it's cool. I hope you get a better understanding of that shady underworld. But if I may please say, this is just a step in the pond, a pebble in the pond and a step in the right direction, laying the foundation and getting the movement going. So we will do more of this and maybe get a more thorough cyber threat intelligence course in the mix that will get much more tactical with the links, with the actual places to check out for current real threat actors, ransomware leak sites, et cetera, et cetera. But I know that's a whole nother direction and dimension for and from what we're doing with Active Directory. So with that, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about that course. The Mastering Active Directory security is actually going to be structured and set up as a sort of path, sort of like a collection of what will be multiple courses, in which case you might have seen there is Volume 1 and Volume 2. And these are incredible because they are laying the foundation. I think Volume 1 understandably starts a little bit more hand-holding, guided fundamentals and getting into the real understanding. And then Volume 2 starts you to play with a little bit more. That is significantly larger than Volume 1 because you get into action. But I can sing the praises, although I can't really do it as much justice as I can with the source, with the absolute mastermind, Slavi himself. So we'll bring him in just a moment, but I do want to have another quick little shout out and showcase. Thank you so much for tuning in to these streams. I realize it's a way to learn, and it's also a way for me to try and help spread the word and get info out. So you being here means a heck of a lot to me. And what we'd like to try to do is help share a code, like a discount code, so we can give you a little bit more access because you have been here. So cutesy coupon code, I know we got to do it, right? But there's also 20% off for both the Mastering Active Directory and MAD services. The courses there are going to be accessible with the 20% off discount code that we can share all throughout the live stream. We'll pop it up in chat. We'll pin it on the screen. I don't want to have you sit here, waste your time, and wait till the very end. I don't want to do that to you. I feel like that's kind of sleazy. If I say, oh, we're gonna release this code, we're gonna have a discount, but then I dangle the carrot so you have to sit here for an hour and wait for that thing. So if anyone, maybe the voices in the back of my head, production over in the background, the earpiece that I have. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. If we could drop that coupon code and then let's get Slavi in the house. I can go ahead and pin that super duper quick. Cool. Let me go ahead and start the party and we'll get Slavi up in here. Thank you so much, chat people. Oh, I have clicked the wrong one because you are too fast. Excellent. Madstream 20 gets 20% off both Volume 1 and Volume 2. And with that, I've successfully accidentally burned 10 minutes. And let's do the real show. Let's actually get Slavi up in the house. I'll turn off the music and let's do some Active Directory. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Slavi, if you're ready, my friend, we can start the party. Cool. Hello, hello.
Hi, John. Good to see you.
Great to see you, my friend. How is life? How is everything? It's
Life
Friday.
is great. It is our first interaction in public, so that's actually quite exciting.
No, I'm
I'm
right there with you.
very excited to be here and actually present our common work that we have designed so far.
Well, I can sing your praises, but I think you have an incredible list of accolades, wealth of experience, and quite a resume. Could you tell me a little bit more about you, or hey, what you've been up to, what you're doing now, and what you're all about, at least to help add some background context for folks tuning in?
Absolutely, and thank you for that. I'm one of those new guys, so to speak, because I actually graduated university back 10 years ago with cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is actually in my veins. I didn't just have to learn it on the job. I studied cybersecurity as I started. And in the past 10 years or so, I've been switching between different consulting companies where I have been doing a lot of penetration tests and different roles around that offensive side of cybersecurity. One of my roles was actually on the defensive side as well, because I wanted to challenge myself a little bit more, and I was doing digital forensics and incident response. But after a couple of cases where I don't sleep for days and nights, I think I turned things around. I went back on the offensive side, um, and came back into the hacking community, which I'm really happy to be part of.
Excellent.
I have also been an instructor in some of the other platforms before. I have been engaged with Illinois Security, where I developed quite a few of the courses in there. And I have also created some modules in Hack the Box as well previously. And
Heck yeah.
now we get to do that together in just hacking training.
Well, I am super flattered and grateful for your support, and just incredible. I think coming from a lot of strong arms in the community, a lot of hey, incredible contributors for the industry. I really
Thanks.
like a couple of the notes that you had about even just your kind of growth and red teaming and offensive security being a heck of a lot of fun, trying some of the defensive work, blue team work, because it's both, right? You got to have both. You have to really be on all ends of what we do, but it
I
is
really think
time.
that it's quite important for you as an attacker to understand what traces you leave behind you. And the best way to understand that is to understand the defensive side. What can they see depending on the actions that you take? So just by executing a task or running a file, what artifacts are left behind for the guys to catch? Then you can also understand how EDR products and CM systems are working and how they can catch you on the way. So you can try to avoid that. Now, with this course that we're designing here, and we're going to talk about, we're not really trying to hide or carry out any of this more advanced mastery. We're simply loud, noisy. We want to find issues in Active Directory and we want to exploit them. But maybe at a later stage, hey, we may get to discuss something more advanced and actually try to hide against best-in-class systems, tools, and so on.
Can you actually maybe fill me in on that structure, the architecture in your mind of, look, volume one, I know covering a lot more credentials, volume two, a little bit more protocols. What do you have in store for, I don't know, what would be volume three? And I don't know if there's even 4 or 5. How far will you go with this thing?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So thank you for that. Like you said, volume one is really primarily about understanding what is Active Directory, what is domain controllers, domain admins, the very basics of Active Directory. We even implement Active Directory from scratch. We spin up Windows servers, we promote them to domain controllers, we go through the entire journey of getting Active Directory up and running together, and then we discuss credentials. See, credentials are very important in Active Directory because it's not just about usernames and passwords. It also can be certificates. It could also be password hashes. So getting a hold of any credential could be as good as having a password in most cases, because you can authenticate with it and you can pretend to be any user if you steal their credential. And that's what we're trying to focus. And also some of the issues that we have uncovered with passwords over the years. Like, for example, by default, Active Directory have a password policy, which is 7 characters. And if you have a password policy which requires 7 characters, your password could easily be set to password 1, right? That's something easily guessable. So you as an attacker need to understand what you're against, and doing information gathering to figure out how your current environment is hardened that you're trying to compromise is the first step. And trying to identify additional credentials to move laterally across the environment to it would be the next natural step as well, if you can't find any additional vulnerabilities. There's many things that we can discuss about credentials, really, because one thing is plain text passwords, how are passwords stored, like I mentioned, password policies, passwords of domain users, of local users, how do they differ, how can you use domain users, how can you later remove with them, reuse of passwords, both for local users and admin accounts, and so on. So when we talk about credentials, there's a lot more than just simply using a username and password that I need to discuss. And like I said, one of the things which is quite interesting is reusing credentials. I guess you might have seen in some environments, John, yourself, people tend to have now two user accounts, one being the normal user account, say John, and an admin account on top of that being admin John. But how many organizations have actually checked that their IT admins don't use the same password across both accounts? Because if you have two accounts but use the same password, eventually the segmentation of identities doesn't exist. So password share is also another big topic that we're discussing in the first version of MAS. And
no, I love it. Honestly, I know sometimes it's a weird balancing act of like, hey, the introductory and beginning content, because folks might, and I know, hey, we do have a very, very broad, I think, a varied audience that's so diverse of people from all skill levels, which is a blessing and a curse because hey, some folks might roll their eyes and say, oh, this is just the start, everybody knows this. But I think it's super duper important, especially with what you've all laid out here for these first couple sets, the first couple volumes, because you're laying such a thorough foundation that you can add to this even as new things come up. I hope that's a huge driving point, is that look, this is going to be updated over time as new things come out, but because you'll have such a strong base in understanding of the inner workings of even something when you zoom in as much as credentials or protocols, volume 2, etc. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I think I love to see this, even if it means going back to the basics to a certain extent, right?
Yeah. I actually think the basics is also important for another reason, because seasoned experts and professionals, of course, they already know this beginner stuff, but new people are also constantly enrolling in our field, and it's very important to have a well-defined basics for them. So going forward is going to be easier for them to get on board much faster, because we get to share all our experiences in a course like this one. And another thing is, Active Directory is a very old system, if we can call it a system, because it's not just one system, right? And its main purpose is to provide identity. It's an identity provider, but it can be extended to be so many more things. You can add services that can make it a file server, DNS, you name it. It can almost support all of it. So by doing everything from the very basics, we get to discuss all of these different services as well, not just the identity protection part. And we're going to be attacking that in later modules of MATS. We'll spin up a PKI, a DNS, a ABC, and we're going to be going against these, figure out what kind of attacks exist, so we can better prepare our students to actually exploit these vulnerabilities and discover them in real life. And like I said, Active Directory is a very, very old system. It's constantly being updated and new features are being added. But new features doesn't mean that they're secure as well. Like from the very beginning, Active Directory has been quite insecure. New research is demonstrating that even more and more. Almost every month, there's a new escalation path in Active Directory. And it will keep coming. And that's why it's also important to have modules split the way that we have done them so far, because we can constantly keep adding new and new attacks as they get released, discovered, or maybe something that we discover ourselves that we can discuss in these modules. And what I'm going to say, which sounds crazy, is that Active Directory was not released really to be secure from the very beginning, because if you think about Microsoft as an organization, they need to create a product which is usable for a larger amount of people out of the box. So when you deploy Active Directory, pretty much everything is up and running from the very beginning, as opposed to being disabled to begin with. And having many services and functions that you're not necessarily going to use being active opens up your attack surface and the opportunities for an attacker to exploit your environment. And to be honest, in a full-blown Active Directory setup, which is a default installation, there are already by default ways to escalate in that Active Directory. If you haven't done any hardening in Active Directory by default, just spin it up, I guarantee you a skilled attacker will be able to escalate their privileges right out of the box, fully patched Windows servers. So it's very important to actually bring up the basics as well, because not everybody has it.
That's super important. I tried to sprinkle in, hey, some visuals for Volume 1 and Volume 2 as you were laying the foundation again. But I don't know. If you're up for it, I'd love for us to be able to take some AMA. I don't know, question and answers. If anyone has things in the chat, we could try to build up maybe a queue for us if anyone has anything specific you'd like us to banter about. But if you'd be willing, Slavi, I think one of the coolest things would be able to see some of the tricks that you've got up your sleeve for a demo, for a showcase. We were thinking and brainstorming just a bit ago, kind of before we wanted to do this stream together, thinking like, what's meaty, what has some substance that folks would really enjoy? Because I know a lot of folks like to see some of those sweet, flashy fireworks. But I think, at least from what you teased, telling me your ideas, there's some really cool and really neat stuff. So I'm very excited for whenever you're ready to start the show and tell.
I think we absolutely should do that. And of course, it's going to be live, so hopefully everything works. And for the second part of mass, actually, which we haven't discussed yet, what we wanted to build is not just on top of credentials, but we wanted to actually expand and make a bigger course, which includes a little bit more than basics. And then we expanded by including different protocols that Active Directory is using, and permissions, abusing permissions, how to discover misconfigurations. We're actually building a lot more on just credentials, because credentials are important. Once you have a username and password, you can use them to authenticate in Active Directory. But then what protocol do you use to authenticate with? And why should you know about multiple protocols? Can't you just RDP to a system? In theory, you can, but what if your customer has blocked RDP or network segmentation is blocking RDP connections? You need to know about the existence of other protocols which can give you those remote code executions. And that's actually what we're going to demonstrate just in here as well. Also, a little bit of privilege escalation in Active Directory. How can you go from a local admin to domain admin if there's some overlaps? So I think I'm actually ready to start with the demos if you don't have any questions.
No, thank you so much. I have a headset that's low on battery, so I figured, well, okay, thank you for the top cover, and now we can totally segue to do some sweet showcase.
Yep, awesome. So
would you be willing to full screen and zoom in and do all the things so it's, hey, ginormous text that people might be able to read, even on the old mobile screen?
Absolutely. You just tell me if you can't see or read something, and I'll act on it right away.
Cool.
So one of the first things that I want to show you is, because like literally 1 minute ago, I asked you, why would you need to know about the existence of multiple protocols? Can't we just RDP to everything that exists? And in theory, you can, but what if RDP is blocking, you can't reach it? What we're going to discuss in this course is the different protocols that exist that you can use to connect to Windows machines. And one of these protocols, which is one of my favorite ones because it tends to be a little bit less detected, is using VMI. If you have valid credentials of a user, you can use VMI to authenticate and remotely execute commands against a system. So for example, in here, I have already prepared something simple. How do we authenticate from a Linux machine to a Windows machine using VMI? It's a built-in command in Kali Linux, which we're using for all our demos in the course. And what we're demonstrating is that we have the credentials of a user called Alice in the domain corp with the password Slavi123, and we can try to authenticate against a remote machine. In this case, the IP address is denoting our domain controller. If we just execute this command, we'll see that we successfully get a Windows prompt, and we are running in this, sorry, if I type it correctly, hostname, we're successfully running on domain controller 1 by connecting over VMI. Very simple. I just want to demonstrate that there's life outside RDP as well, right? The same thing can actually happen if you don't necessarily have the plain text password, but you have the password hashes of this user account. We can execute exactly the same command by using the password hash if we have obtained this password hash somehow of the user. If I copy paste the command again, I get exactly the same result. You can see that I have this Windows prompt, and if I run commands, it will tell me that I'm running on DC1. DC1 being our domain controller. So credentials is not just passwords. It can be hashes, it can be certificates as well. Certificates is something we have not yet discussed, but they're going to come as a separate module in the future as well. John, as you know, back in the good old days, Responder was a very, very popular tool. And it seems to have, things have really started changing. Are you familiar with Responder? Have you used it yourself? I'm not sure how much.
I have, yeah, I have used Responder. I think probably for the maybe limited, or not to say, I don't know. I guess the cookie cutter use case that we all tend to know. But it's like, oh, let me / type in the SMB share that I want to hit to see if we could get the connection. But I don't want to steal your thunder. I'd let you.
Right. So Responder is actually one of the tools that we are bringing up in the course, and we're going to be using it for many different purposes. The one that we use it so far.
Before we get too far down the rabbit hole, I'm sorry, would you mind amping up the text size just a smidge more? I think folks are worried, it might be just a little bit blurry. So the bigger we can get, the better, truth be told.
Is this better?
Maybe 2 more if you're willing, and then I think we're okay. Heck yeah. Thank you. I hate to be that annoying, like, oh.
I hope the letters don't jump out of my screen.
I look so silly when I have ginormous icons and a terminal way too zoomed in, but I hope good. So.
Great. So what I was going to tell you about Responder is that Responder, one of the main things we would use it for is to catch credentials on the network. If you have network access it alone without having username and password, you are in a great position to capture credentials that are flying on the network. Somebody might ask, why the hell would credentials be flying in the network? Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because you see, like I said, Windows by default is not designed to be secure. It's designed to work in every possible case you can imagine. Microsoft doesn't want their users to spend days configuring their Windows machine so it starts working. By default, it has many features and services enabled. Some of these features are legacy protocols called NetBIOS and LLMNR, multicast, which are broadcasting protocols trying to resolve names on your local network, local NAN. See, these are protocols which were designed before DNS was a stable protocol, and they used to be really useful back in the days. They're not so useful these days because DNS should be taking care of all of that. And when was the last time we heard about DNS failing, really? I know there are some issues here and there, but it's not really DNS issues, primarily network engineers breaking something. But what Responder is going to do is he's going to listen on the wire to capture these broadcasting protocols. And it's important to capture these protocols or these packets coming in because they normally carry authentication information with them. In most cases, that is going to be username and user's password hash. I want to demonstrate you how Responder works. It's nothing new, but the interesting part about Responder in 2025 is that there's a new protocol which is becoming very popular, which is working in exactly the same fashion as those NetBIOS back in the days. And that protocol is MDNS. It is widely used from what I can see in big organizations because MDNS is being used to connect remotely to, for example, whiteboards, which are remotely accessible. Your machine in the environment is going to start broadcasting itself. It's going to try to find Chromecast or other casting devices by using that protocol and the casting between them. And that is actually enabled in many organizations. So Responder is becoming more and more famous again. It's resurfacing. And I really like that because I love this tool. It has helped me to escalate my privileges over the years so many times.
So if I may regurgitate, if that's okay, just for my own understanding, I have always used, I think, just the default way of using Responder, SMB, UNC path, whatever. But it sounds like there is a heck of a lot more to be able to do with it, and even one that's like more reliable now more than ever, 2025, compared to the easy stuff back in the day. Is that right?
It's actually exactly the same.
Okay.
It's exactly the same. There's no difference. It's just an extra protocol which carries credentials. So if we go back 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would go to my customers and I would ask them to disable NetBIOS and LLMNR as a finding. And they did so. But now in 25, MDNS is enabled by default on Windows 11. So if their images have not updated since then, there's a good chance that this would still work because there's a new protocol which supports the same thing. So I'll just start Responder quickly on the interface where my Kali is listening on or running. to listen for commands. For those who haven't seen Responder, we have a whole module on it in the course. You'll get familiar with everything that you see on the screen. It's not necessarily important at the moment. The most important thing is the first three listeners or poisoners, is that Responder is going to try to poison these requests to try to capture credentials. We have LLMNAR, NetBIAS, and the protocol that we just discussed, DNS. We're not going to see any events because my environment is empty. There's no users connecting to anything. So we have to simulate that activity to see that something's happening. So I'll actually move into one of my Windows machines to simulate a user activity that we can see that Responder is going to capture it. I'll just simulate that I'm trying to access some share. It doesn't matter which one. And if I go back to my Linux machine, we're going to see that some activity is coming in and there's a lot of poisoning happening. We can see MDNS, LLMNAR are constantly coming up with some data. And here we're going to see that we actually successfully captured the hash of a user, Alice. So if you go into Responder logs, at this moment, we have a NTLM hash of this user. Depending on the version of the NTLM hash, we have different options of what we can use it. If it's NTLM normal hash, which is the same as password storage hash, we can use it for pass the hash attacks. If it's NTLM version 2, we have different options. We can either try to crack the hash using Hashcat or other tools, which we're doing in the course, by the way. So we demonstrate how to crack passwords. We also explain in detail what is a password hash, how to generate it, caveats with it, and so on. Or the other option that we can use for the NTLM version 2 hashes is to relay this hash. And relaying is something we actually discussed together. We can have Responder listening and then NTLM relaying the hash to give us access to another resource in Active Directory. The hash itself is not important. The important thing is that we have multiple protocols now surfacing again after so many years that can carry this password hashes as well. So very important. If you're on an engagement, you want to run Responder back again.
Is Responder something that you just kind of have up and running at all times when you're doing a test? It's just like, okay, first instinct, knee-jerk reaction, first thing the checklist is make sure Responder is going, and then just let it go.
I actually do. I have a separate machine only for Responder.
Oh,
so
wow.
Whenever I'm on an engagement, I would hook up that machine to the customer environment only to try to capture these hashes.
That's
and
awesome.
In many cases, actually I can think of 3 cases where the customer told me Responder is pointless in our environment because we have disabled NetBIAS and LLMNAR. And then I come up with MDNS carrying those credentials and gotcha moments. Right.
That's great to hear. Very cool.
Good. We have very limited time, so maybe if you don't mind to move ahead with other
Totally.
demos.
Yeah,
I want to
you got a little
demonstrate
bit
something
more.
else as well. I wanted to move into a Windows environment and demonstrate something which is super cool, but also at the same time super scary. And I want to demonstrate the same thing across multiple versions of Windows, because at some point Microsoft actually managed to fix this, and I want to also discuss how do we bypass newer versions of Windows as well. Can you see my screen? It should be showing a Windows image. Just before I start clicking stuff, I want to make sure that everything is visible.
Yes, I can see your screen. And if I may, I did see one cool question come through. Hey, is this going to be uploaded to YouTube, or do we need strictly the course to get the info? The live stream and its VOD will be accessible on YouTube. We'll make sure that, hey, we'll have that kind of accessible and available for anyone. But if you'd like more of the fun, in-depth stuff and be able to play with some more of this yourself, would totally recommend the course. I think that's hopefully fun. Sorry.
Great.
Anyway.
I think we might now end up having issues with the visuals.
If you're able to right-click the toolbar of PowerShell, does that let you amp up the text and the properties?
It should.
I know it's a little bit
of font.
Yeah, clunky, but that way you'll have
there you go.
maybe not that big. I don't know. Whatever you need. Cool.
That should be better. So what I want to demonstrate in here is that we are running on the system server 1, and we are the user Alice in the organization or the domain corp. Alice is one of our domain admins. So Alice is connected to a server called server 1. Now, what I want to outline is that in many organizations that I go to, I would see that it's very common practice to assign local admin permissions to consultants or to few of your employees. Because what is the impact to have access to only one server? That test server that nobody's using, what is the issue of having one developer having local admin rights only on that one server? Like, there shouldn't be any issues, right? I'll actually carry out this connection with RDP instead, so we can demonstrate the issue. Sign out, repeat it from a Windows machine instead.
I'm very interested in the RDP angle here because I feel like that often gets overlooked. And like we know, again, the like classic use case vanilla, oh, you use it to RDP, but can you do other weird shenanigans and strange stuff with it?
So we want to demonstrate how RDP can be abused in here as well, right? So I'm the user Alice. I'm connecting to this server 1 machine. I'll just run it again so we can see that I'm connected to it. RDP to server 1. Nothing fancy. I'm a domain admin. And then at the same time, one of our users has been given local admin rights to this machine. To showcase an even better case, I'll just authenticate as the local administrator of this machine, not even a domain user. Right? I'll just log in with the account administrator, which is only administrator of this machine. It has no rights in our domain at all. From this account, if we go to Task Manager, we'll see that Alice and administrator are connected to this machine, and they both have an active session. If the sessions were disconnected, we'll see that the status in here is disconnected. But both users are connected to the same machine. Administrator is a local user only on the server 1, and Alice is a domain admin in our environment. So how can we, from a local user with administrative rights on this machine, escalate and become domain admin in that domain? We can actually hijack this session, which is mind-blowing. How can a local user compromise domain admin? That should never be possible, be the case, right? In Task Manager, by default, Microsoft is so nice. Of course, there's many ways you can steal the password of Alice and so on. There are techniques that we're discussing in the course, but we're only demonstrating one of them in this live stream. Microsoft, by default, has this built-in connectability in the Task Manager. If you try to connect from one user to another user, it will ask you to authenticate as that user before the connection is successful, which makes sense. You should not be able to change your context. But actually, if you're running as the system user on this machine, you can connect to any hanging RDP session without having to provide password. So what I'm going to do now is, since I'm running as this user administrator, I'm going to escalate my privileges to system and switch to Alice by hijacking the graphical interface. So we can visually see that we hijack the RDP session, right?
I didn't know you could do that over RDP, or at least like using that as the vessel. That
right.
In my mind, I feel like I parallel it to like the SU command in Linux, like in the Linux end. Once you become root, okay, cool, I'll switch to whatever user I want. But
Exactly.
system on Windows through RDP is kind of cool.
It is pretty mad because without having the password or the credentials, we're not dumping LSAS, we're not touching anything crazy in this machine. We can hijack that user, get the graphical interface, and we can execute and do anything we want as that user. So if you look into my command prompt at the moment, you will see that I'm running as user administrator, and I will execute psexec as a mean to escalate my privileges to the system user by specifying the flag -s and -i for interactive session that I want to spawn a new command prompt as this user. Once it starts and I who am I again, I will see that now I'm running as NT authority system. So now I'm no longer the administrator of this machine. I am running as the system user on the machine. I'll start Task Manager now from this command prompt running as a system user, which means that the process Task Manager will also start as the user system. And in this case, if we go to Alice and I click connect, my session just changes. Now I'm hijacking that session, right? I actually just became Alice. I can run anything I want. I can add myself to domain names. I can do anything in the case. And somebody just wrote a comment. Lee Frank, thank you for the comment. Will you kick somebody from the RDP session when you do this hijack? Yes, they'll lose connection. If there's somebody actively running in here, they'll lose the connection. But in nearly 99% of organizations worldwide, most people are just disconnected. right? The session continues to execute because they don't want their windows to be closed next time they log in. So what they do is they normally click the X and the session doesn't end. Yeah, of course, they don't have the RDP application running, but all the processes and the session in the backend is still running, so they can connect to it and see all everything that is there. In most cases, I would only use this on a disconnected session. I don't want to alert users, of course, that we're compromising the right. But if you go to an organization which has multiple IT admins, the likelihood of seeing a running session which is disconnected is nearly certain. So this was exciting. This is one of my favorite hacks. I just changed my context from one user who had only one local admin right into becoming basically domain admin. So what is the impact of giving local admins to one server? Well, this is the impact. An attacker can actually escalate. And escalating Active Directory almost certainly means that you're going to be ransomware heavily.
True enough, yeah.
So
well, this is really cool. I think you're blowing a couple people's mind here. Some questions was like, wait a second, was this patched some time ago? I thought this was patched. This still tends to work. Does this work over other, I guess, non-native RDP clients? Because it's still their session, it's still their login. But like if someone were to use X-Free RDP or our desktop, you're still going to have a Windows login, are you not?
So. No, you're not. The reason why this works is because you ring as the system user on the server, and then you can essentially hijack any of the sessions that exist on the RDP. With Windows 2019 servers, Microsoft somehow silently managed to fix this. So even if you ring as a system user, unless you're coming from a local console, you will actually be prompted to enter the password of this account. And while they fixed this, they actually introduced a new capability called RDP shadowing, which is amazing, which is basically doing the same thing. You can again hijack the session by using RDP shadowing. And if you want, we can go ahead and actually demonstrate that.
Yeah, please. This is fun.
We are demonstrating this in the class as well, because if you end up in an older version of Windows, sure enough, you can carry this, you can hijack the account. But if you're in a newer version, like in this case, where our domain controller, for example, is running Windows 2022 server. I just want to make sure it's 22 or 25. It is running Windows 22. So it will be fixed. If we try to carry out this attack, we can also just actually try it, so we can show how it reacts. But it's not going to work in the same way as it does. I also need to connect another user so I can try to hijack the session. I will just RDP as the administrator as well. So we have another session that we could potentially hijack. Administrator of the domain corp.
Just for quick context, chat, I'm sorry, I know we're moving quick to be able to kind of experiment and play and tinker, so I don't know if we're going to have everything super big and zoomed in yet, but I hope you can make enough sense out of the RDP clients or a terminal here and there. But if you need to amp us, if you need us to amp up the text size, please, please, please don't hesitate to say the word.
So what I want to show you here is, if I look at Task Manager and Domain Controller at the moment, I have the domain administrator, the default account in Active Directory, and Alice both connected. And we're discussing earlier disconnected sessions. I can just show you what a disconnected session looks like. If I click, you see that I'm connected to DC1 as the administrator account. If I exit this session, now it's going to be shown as disconnected. But a user can reconnect, and all the windows, everything will still be opened. They don't have to reopen everything if the session has still existed. And I guarantee you, in every organization, by default in Active Directory, sessions don't expire. So if IT admin clicks X and not sign out, the session will be active and you can hijack it. So this is what we can see when nobody is connected, the session is disconnected, and we are currently running as the user Alice, so our session is still connected. There's no status on it. Now, if I escalate my privileges again with psexec to become a system and run task, I'll just close the old one. Just run task manager. This new Windows server, I go to users, try to hijack the administrator account. That actually worked. And I know why it worked. Because I was I was connecting from a local session. That was a bad example. If I was connecting from an RDP session as well, this will pop up with enter the administrator password. So it's not going to work in that case.
Okay.
I can actually, I can demonstrate by doing 2 RDP sessions, but to save time, I think I want to show something else instead.
Cool. Yeah.
This will be a presentation of enter your password. So I said there's a new feature which is RDP shadowing, and if you have used one of these remote control programs like TeamViewer, LogMeIn, they're very popular. Actually, with Windows 1, Microsoft released their own as well, which is built-in that can be used. If you have used one of these TeamViewer sessions, you're actually able to control the screen and you can view it. And what Microsoft enhanced RDP with is giving you the ability to control an RDP session. So you can hook up to any active session and then control it. So instead of hijacking the session itself, what we're going to do is we're going to modify the operating system to allow control of sessions and then just hook up to an existing session. And we can actually demonstrate that. So we'll first perform some RDP connections. So we have something to hijack. From our workstation 1, I will connect to the domain controller, once with the administrator and once as Alice. Just want to make sure that we have sessions running. And it doesn't matter which one do we use to hijack the other, really.
I just want you to be prepared. We have a lot of really awesome questions coming in the queue. Everyone's like, "Whoa, this is so cool! How do you do what about in this?" So this will be fun.
I love it. So what I want to show you is instead of looking at Task Manager which users are connected, we can also do query user in command prompt. Maybe I can make it a bit bigger. So if I query user, I'm going to see that there's 2 users connected, Alice and administrator. They're both on RDP sessions, and they're both active. Now, for shadowing RDP to work, the session has to be active. But if the session is active, then it's a little bit too easy. So I want to show you how we can get this working even with an inactive session. So what I'm going to do is I'll actually disconnect the session of the user administrator. I'll just keep it running. There you go. So if I run this query user again, we're going to see that the state of this administrator session now is disconnected. Now I am the user Alice. I'm connected to this machine. I'm local admin. How can I hijack the administrator account? The way that you can do it, I'll just show to you that it doesn't work by default. So I'll use my Windows machine, which is Windows 10, to try to RDP hijack the session. It will fail, just so we can confirm afterwards that it actually works. So if you run the MSTSC RDP client, and what we want to do is we want to shadow a session. And while we are shadowing, we don't want to consent prompt. So the user doesn't need to click, yes, I allow the shadowing. And we're going to get control over the session. And the session is running on the device, in our case, on DC1.
Would you mind amping up the text super quick? Because I think a ton of people would be super interested in that command.
Awesome. Thank you.
It looks like /shadow, and then...
Yep, I will. Hopefully it's better now.
Yeah.
So we need to shadow a session. And the session that we're going to shadow is a number that we need to provide. And that number we get from our query user. From the domain controller with our RDP. The one that we want to hijack is session ID 2, where the administrator is running. So if we provide 2, this will fail for many reasons. So to get this working, what we need to do is modify the backend of this server. We want to allow RDP shadowing, because by default, this is not allowed. But if you're a local administrator on the machine, you can add a registry key where this is actually going to be allowed. So I said there's 2 reasons why this failed. The first one is because the registry key itself is not there, so we need to add it. And the second reason why the command failed is because the session is disconnected. If you heard me just a couple minutes ago, I said this only works with active sessions. So I'll add this registry key. I need to be admin to be able to execute it. So the key is deleted it. Great.
I know we got small text for a moment, so just quick air cover. This is a reg add command, so old school cmd.exe utility to be able to just tweak the registry, same way you would do with regedit in the GUI. It is modifying HKLM, HKey local machine, so you will need admin privileges because that does need to be system-wide, which is why I had to open up another PowerShell.
Exactly. And I run the command executes successfully. We're creating a new rec dword, setting it to the value 2. And the value 2 in this case means that the server is going to allow RDP shadowing without consent, and it allows you to control the session as well. So if we try again now, it's still going to fail because if you look at our sessions, the session is still disconnected. So we need to force this administrator account to have an active session. And the crazy thing about this is that, again, if you're a system on this machine, you can force the session to become active. So if we do the same exercise with psexec to escalate our permissions to system.
So hang on, after an RDP session has disconnected, you could still tell it to reactivate, even if, what?
Yes. That is crazy, right?
Maybe people knew this and I just didn't. I'm totally okay to be a fool here, but can anyone clue me in? Did anyone else know that? Zombie RDP session?
In fact, that is what it is, actually. If the session is disconnected, you can hijack it, you can control it, you can do many things with it. So if I run who am I now, I'm going to bring as user system. And what I'm going to do is I'll execute a command where we're going to change the session. If you remember the session, I'll just do it here. Query user, so we can see the sessions. The session number 2 is disconnected. So what we can do is we can execute tscon with the number of the session and send this to destination console, which will force this session to actually be console enabled. And if I do query user again, now the session is actually active.
All right, so we're gonna write that one down.
Right. So now we have configured the backend server to accept RDP shadowing, and we have enabled the session itself to be active. So from any other machine, now I can try to hijack this second RDP session. As you can see, there we go. This is the actual domain controller we hijacked. I did not even have to provide anybody's credentials now.
That's wild.
No administrator, no Alice, nothing. I just say, if the server allows shadowing, you just specify which session you want to hijack, and then Microsoft gives you the ability to basically control that session, which is mind-blowing. So even though they fixed the previous issue, they introduced a new feature, which in a way provides you the same capability.
Okay, so
if I left you speechless, I'm sorry about that.
No. It's cool, and I am cognizant that in a single window of a video display, this is kind of hard to make sense of because you're obviously RDPing in and out of different things, and it's kind of hard to keep track of the context.
Might be confusing.
But that's okay. I think obviously, look, hey, if you have a couple text supplements or some images and graphics, as you would expect in a course, this would be perfect and really cool and easy to make sense of. So there's my little plug for MADS Volume 1 and 2. But I know, and I think I'm sure folks will kind of stumble over and quibble about like, oh, well, you needed to add that administrator registry key. You needed local admin to be able to set up the backend server in that way. And I'm sure people see that as a sticking point, but I think, and I'd love to get your hot take, it's not unrealistic where you have landed on a host one way or another that you've got local admin on, and you're now trying to figure out, okay, how do I move from this box to others? How do I actually get new access either from other sessions or from other users or for other ways to do movement? Well, if you can and or are able and willing to flip that switch in the registry key so you've got this capability, then when people RDP are connected and out, you almost have like a post-exploitation technique in here. Is that fair to say, or how do you picture it?
Pretty much. And I think you might have heard that people refer to penetration testing as assume breach, because you need to assume that one device or one user is compromised. What could an attacker do afterwards? And in any assume breach scenario, you would actually give the pen tester themselves this access, having local admin rights at least to one machine to carry out and perform these attacks as well. Because it is not unrealistic that you're either going to compromise a user which already has local admin rights on their machine, or if you're a more advanced attacker, you might have a exploitation to escalate your privileges on the box itself. Many different ways that you can escalate to local administrator on the machine. It is really a given for anybody these days when they're doing assume breach pen test, because there's no reason to spend time. You escalate your privileges, and if you can't, there's going to be a Windows patch Tuesday next in a couple of days. There'll probably be a new exploit for local that you could use. Not every company patches the day after, right?
A lot of also really good questions of like, well, okay, what about getting to system? I know you were running PsExec, and that would still require local admin, but it's not to say, oh, PsExec is the only way to do that. I've got a couple videos of you like, oh, you can do enough escalation with even utilities like Service UI that comes from like the Microsoft deployment kit. So that's another signed Microsoft binary that just gets you there, or any of the other, a couple like high escalating privileges and processes and System 32.
Actually, one of my favorite way to get system, you need to have local admin no matter what. Otherwise, you need to have some kind of exploit. We do discuss techniques how to escalate your privileges. Like for example, you can steal credentials with Responder, which will allow you to be local admin on a box, right? There's so many ways to get there. So it's given we need to have that admin rights. Nobody's questioning that part for this to work. But my favorite way for getting from administrator to system is by using Sysmon if it's installed, because Sysmon has tokens that you can hijack, and because Sysmon is running already as a service as system, you can actually steal their tokens and become system yourself.
And latch on to all that telemetry.
Even me, I recommend to every customer to use Sysmon.
Yep.
Because Sysmon is amazing. If you don't have Sysmon in your environment, it's very likely that you're not going to detect any attack that is happening in there. EDR products provide similar capability, and they might be as good. But if you don't have an EDR product and no Sysmon, you can't detect an attack. No matter what your SOC or whoever else says, you simply don't have enough logs and context to detect that something is happening. You can see who's logging in and who's not logging in and who's failing to log in, but there's no context in that activity to detect an attack. Just because administrator fails to log in, that doesn't mean that the account is compromised.
Wow. All right. Well, goodness, this is awesome. I think it feels like chat's alive and a lot of really cool questions. But I know we are at the top of the hour. I'm not going to cut us off if that's okay with you for a little bit. But I do want to, hey, in case anyone has to run before the top of the hour, this is kind of what you are setting the stage for in Volume 1 and Volume 2 of MADS and the Mastering Active Directory Security. Is that right? Or what more, 3, 4, 5, etc.? What's coming and what do we got on the ground now?
Right. So 1 and 2 are actually containing very simple basic attacks, but they're really important to know because the advanced attacks that we're going to demonstrate later on, they chain together with the simple ones in many cases. So this is really setting up the basic of what's coming up later. And without demonstrating these attacks first, we can't assume that everybody knows them to demonstrate something more complicated going forward. 3, 4, and 5, yeah, let's see how far we get. My goal is really to demonstrate and to brain dump all my experience in the past 10 years as an offensive penetration tester.
Well, I am super excited about it, and I cannot thank you enough for doing it. I hope we've given you a canvas to be able to play and tinker with, a whole lab environment that's easily spin up. You've got text-based material, video, of course. You've got quizzes and things to help learn and lay it all out. But thank you again and again and again.
Yeah, you're very welcome. One of the things that we also discuss in MADS 2 is permissions in Active Directory, because it is very hard to get permissions right as an IT admin, and you normally lose control and overview of who has what permissions, who is member of which group. I have been in an environment where domain users was indirectly member of domain admins. That is just completely mind-blowing. There's a big chain of groups that domain users member of, but eventually it ends up being domain admin. So we as attackers, we need to be able to understand these permissions and figure out how do we abuse them. If you're able to change a user's password, how do you change that password? In most cases, you're going to bring us command line tools, so you have to know which tools to use, how to use them, maybe anticipate detection as well, and how can you react on that detection. So we're discussing a lot of permissions, and then we introduce the most popular tool out there, Bloodhound, I think.
Yeah. There was a comment like, I thought we were going to do Bloodhound. Where's Bloodhound? Why not Bloodhound yet? So
it is part of the course, of course. You can't go around without Bloodhound. Bloodhound's motto, we need to think in graphs, right? That's how we discover flows. And there's so many misconfigurations you can find in Active Directory. We simply can't even cover all of them in one course or any course. So what we want to present here is the basics, and what you're going to encounter out in the wild in your customer environments. It could be something different, but in reality, you're going to have the entire backend to support you to carry out attacks with whatever you encounter.
Phenomenal. How much time do you have, my friend? I know we are at the top of the hour, but are you okay to keep hanging out and bantering for a little bit? Chat is like, please show us more. Please, if you have any more tricks or things up your sleeve, that was so cool. But are you okay? Even if not, we could do some Q&A, AMA, anything?
That's fine. I think if we have any questions, we can look into that as well.
I do see a couple sweet questions. Hey, can we escalate from a domain admins group? And let me see if I can go find that message. Can we escalate from a domain admins group to a local admin and vice versa? Oh, interesting.
So by default in Active Directory, whenever you join a device to Active Directory, domain admin is local administrator on that device directly. So you actually don't even need to escalate, because domain admin is by far the most privileged identity in Active Directory.
So that one, easy win. But local admin to domain admin, not as easy unless you are local admin on the domain controller, correct?
Or on a server where domain admin is logged into, if you want to directly escalate.
And you can do some RDP hijacking.
For example, hey, there's many ways that you can compromise.
Not that your domain admin should be doing any RDP, but it's totally real.
And normally what you do is you dump LSAS or try to steal the credentials or steal tokens, but EDR products are really catching up with all of that. So having more techniques of being able to hijack that other identity can only be helpful. And RDP is just one of them. RDP is really good because RDP just blends with normal traffic in the environment. Yeah. So if you don't want to be detected, you actually want to blend with it.
And it's like always there. You know, like I feel like most people be like, oh, we'll lock down SMB, we'll do all the things for the other protocols. I feel like RDP just either gets cast to the wayside because there's normally a very binary thinking of like, oh, well, we don't use RDP to connect to servers because that's just kind of been the security mantra that people have been screaming and shouting about. Yeah, don't leave RDP open and exposed to the internet. I feel like if you just be like, okay, cool, yeah, we just won't use RDP, then you have not to say a false sense of security, but it's to say that RDP is still there and could totally be messed with.
We just actually got a question about what about the connection between Entra ID and AD? And that is an excellent question. I love it. So if you compromise Active Directory and you have a hybrid setup, you are basically global admin Entra. Yeah. There's no question about that. So
are the Azure or Entra and all those new cloud-based things, are those also on your roadmap for education, training, content, material courses? Or I know that's probably way down the line, right?
I think we should leave that down the line. Ideally, I would love to make offensive courses against Azure as well.
That'd be so cool.
And ideally, as part of MATS, one of the last modules will include actually moving from the on-premise environment to the cloud environment and the different known attacks against it. So we'll definitely poke with the hybrid setup for sure, because that is the most common one. Historically, it used to be ADFS, but like Microsoft themselves are recommending customers to move away from it. Hybrid setup is the most common now with Azure AD Sync.
Yeah,
Enter ID Sync. They
That-
changed the name.
that gets me every time just as well.
I know.
I feel like I have to put all three of them. I say Entra, I say Azure, I say cloud-based, I say 365, just because something will get the thought across to someone.
Yeah, it gets confusing.
Well, are there any other questions that we've seen coming through? I did see one asking just a little bit about Sysmon, or what that was. Hey, what is the word that's being used there? What the heck is Sysmon? If folks aren't familiar, I can try to do my best here, and Slavi, help course correct me if I'm wrong. But Sysmon is one of the security tooling that's accessible from Microsoft. I think Mark Rusanovich, did he build that too, along with SysInternals?
It's part of the SysInternals suite.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so and that is driver based, from what I understand, but it's a defensive tech or tooling to be able to get a lot more enriched insights on stuff that's happening on your computer. So the telemetry, the visibility, logging and monitoring, more so than just what vanilla the Windows event log would give you. So you can see even like network connections or process executions or stuff in a even more organized and simple way with a couple event IDs. Rather than however many thousand that you could expect in any Windows event log. So I feel like it's just a little bit easier to get a stronger arm for defense and for incident response and for detection, without a doubt. And it's free. You can spin it up, but that normally can come in the place of a big bought expensive EDR or endpoint detection response solution. But we'll add the caveat, I think, it's just as Slavi mentioned, if that's going to give us all that low-level access and high admin capability, let's ride off of that to become system or escalator privileges if an attacker gets on the box and does their post-exploitation.
To be honest, if you have local admin rights, you can get system. So
Yeah.
you should not use Sysmon because of that. That would be stupid. And Sysmon is so much more than what you just mentioned, actually, because you have full control to manage the configuration of Sysmon. So you decide what event to be captured. And if, for example, simple example, we want to capture when a process starts. We can also define to exclude certain processes so our logs don't get polluted. So we can say that if we know that teams.exe is going to start all the time, it's going to pollute our logs, we can exclude that team.exe from this directory, gets excluded, and then we don't pollute our logs themselves. We only focus on identifying what is going to be abnormal in the environment if you configure a proper configuration. And you mentioned EDR, just to be clear, Sysmon only logs. It does not block or do anything else.
Thank you. Good call out.
There's actually, Sysmon is constantly being developed. New versions are coming up quite often.
Still?
It can also, for example, capture, it's a few versions per year now, I think, actually.
Excellent.
One of the latest things that they did was to capture DNS requests. So every time your machine makes a DNS query, you actually have the query. And the great thing is, imagine that your environment is compromised and the hackers are connecting back to johnhammond.com. If you have that DNS request, you can immediately search your CM, how many machines connected to johnhammond.com, and basically tell which machines were compromised.
That's crazy cool. Even like DNS-based exfiltration, like just having the visibility is very cool. And any of the logging, hey, I know that's more on that blue team and defense end of it. We have the constructing defense course that Anton has put together, which is an incredible, ginormous lab environment to be able to play with all those things if anyone's interested. But
I want to actually make a bold statement here.
Ooh.
I think Active Directory is really stupid.
Active Directory is really stupid. Tell me more.
In terms of protecting it, because you guys see the way that Active Directory works is that the domain controller is the heart of everything. It contains usernames, passwords, configurations. So all the machines that are applying configurations to them, they have to go and pull these configurations from the domain controller. And all of that information is being transferred over SMB. So SMB becomes very important protocol. And SMB is one of the oldest protocols that exist in Windows, if not the oldest, which does not require MFA or any additional restrictions. So as long as you have a username and a password, you can authenticate with that credential. So you might spend $1 billion protecting your Active Directory, have everything cleaned, But if I can find a domain admin's password in a share, I can directly authenticate with that user, regardless of your network segmentation whatsoever, because the likelihood of you having SMB open to domain controller is certain. If you want your machines to update and to get the latest configurations, it will have access to domain controller over SMB. So if I find a password in a password share exposed of a domain admin, I can just authenticate to that account, even if you have the best EDR and like you name it, segmentation and whatnot. And yeah, you get my point. Protecting Active Directory is really hard. And then Active Directory is the heart of more or less every organization worldwide.
Yeah. I think it goes to show, though, it's like not always exploiting a vulnerability or hacking and using whatever CVE. Maybe more often it's just kind of leveraging and swinging from capabilities and protocols and credentials and the foundational inner working of how stuff happens that you can just, move from one thing to the next and not always need malware in like the traditional conditional sense.
No. Actually, there was a question just now. Why people put passwords in shares? Oh man, don't get me started.
Lots and lots of good questions.
I'm still to find a company which doesn't have any passwords in shares.
Really?
It's all over the place. And the main reason why that is happening is because when you create a share on a server in a domain, you normally give access to that share to users. So users on the server can access the share, right? They can browse through the Explorer. But what people don't realize is that users indirectly contains domain users as a member in that group. So every domain user then gets the rights to access that share, not just users in that server. So every domain user essentially gets exposed and can access shares.
Goodness. Jeez.
Yeah. The great thing is that querying shares and finding, automating how to find passwords in shares is one of the things we discussed in MATS 1. So for those of you who get it, you'll get some fun.
What do you think? Have you seen the LDAP nightmare? Have you seen that CVE 2024-49113? Has that something you've been tracking?
I have. It is a vulnerability that obviously it's against LDAP on a domain controller. So if your domain controller is not patched, basically there's direct escalation from any user, any machine to domain admin, right? If you have the exploit itself, it's game over within a second. This is very similar in criticality to the WannaCry vulnerabilities back in the days.
Eternal Blue?
Eternal Blue. That was SMB issue. Now this is LDAP. And because LDAP is running on domain controller, is directly escalating to domain admin. You're not going to compromise every machine in the environment, but you're going straight to the domain controller. And if you compromise the domain controller, you can basically push back a configuration to every other machine to get compromised.
Now, I have not seen a proof of concept out for that yet, at least the remote code execution end of it. I think I saw the denial of service POC, but unless I'm missing it, unless I'm tracking, I have not looked recently, but I don't know if there was one out yet for an easy button, immediate domain admin via LDAP nightmare.
Yeah, I haven't seen one either, but if it comes out, oh man, it's not going to be good for many organizations. Like I said before, most don't patch the day after a patch is released, right? Somebody said they saw DisySync, right? DisySync actually one of the things we discussed in the AD permissions in MATS 2. So you get to see it again.
This is awesome. This is like, we talk about that in the actually, if you go use MATS 20. Thank you.
The great thing about our cooperation with you, John, is that we're going to keep these courses updated. So whenever something new and something cool comes up, we're going to add it as part of the course.
I love it. Thank you again and again and again. Oh, yeah, I think Safe Breach, or I see folks chatting about LDAP nightmare just a little bit more. Well, any last things to think on, to brainstorm, to chat about? And I don't know how far down the rabbit hole we want to go. This has been phenomenal. Seriously, genuinely. I think you absolutely hit a home run with that little showcase of RDP hijacking, RDP shadowing. I know folks, hey, we whet our appetite with some responder, being able to see the NTLM or whatever hashes that might come through. But that RDP hijack was like, ooh, that's a neat little Easter egg.
It's a favorite of mine. I love it. It's really great. Do you have any more questions or?
No, I think we can tune out. I think we can call it a day. But seriously, genuinely, I know, hey, you're over in a whole other time zone. So it's always a matter of trying to see where can we get folks all over the world to be able to do this thing. Volume 1 and Volume 2 of MADS, or Mastering Active Directory Security, is something that I'm super stoked for. And I hope a lot of folks are excited about it just as well. Justhacking.com is how folks could tune in, get access to it. And then soon, maybe we'll see Volume 3, 4, and however far you're willing to go, my friend. But I cannot say thank you enough.
Great. And thank you for having me here. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Excellent. We'll tune out. Thank you so much, everyone. Until next time, we'll see you on the internet.